Okay, so we'll continue with the short bowel syndrome, which is a video 4. Okay, so now when we see, already we have seen what is short bowel syndrome. So here the small intestine is actually cut, right, and then because of the anastomosis or the surgical repair, the length of the intestine has come down. Okay, so we'll see what is it. Short bowel syndrome. It is a malabsorptive disorder that occurs when there is a mucosal surface area, where there is mucosal surface area, usually as a result of extensive resection of the small intestine. So we get to know that resection is nothing but the surgical cutting, okay, which has been done, which shortens the small intestine, that leads to a malabsorptive disorder. So short bowel syndrome is a malabsorptive disorder that occurs when there is mucosal surface area, usually as a result when there is less mucosal, that is not there. Okay, so please add that there is less mucosal surface area, and that is because of the extensive resection of the small intestine. So next we will see what are the causes. The most common cause of SBS in children include, it can be because of congenital. Sometimes the baby can be born with short intestine itself, so it can become congenital, and then you have anomalies. Okay, so any congenital anomaly as such, and then you have ischemia. So ischemia again, that is because of the lack of blood supply or gangrene formation, where it has to be cut. And then trauma or vascular injury, any injury to the intestine, in that case, or vascular blood supply is cut off. Okay, in that case the resection has to be done. So these are all the various causes. Now next, talking about therapeutic management. So when we say therapeutic management, what are the goals? So to preserve as much length of bowel as possible during surgery. So even when the doctors have to cut the intestine, they have to make sure that they don't cut too much but little. Okay, so whatever is necessary, only that can be resected, and then to maintain the child's nutritional status, growth and development while intestinal adaptation occurs. Okay, so we have to maintain the nutritional growth of the child, and we'll have to see if adequate nutrition is being provided to the child. Then to stimulate intestinal adaptation with enteral feeding. So we have to make sure that through IV or parenteral nutrition, the nutrition can be provided to minimize complication related to the disease process and therapy. So complication has to be avoided. Nutritional support, as I told you, it is a long-term focus. It has to be given to the babies and the individual through TPN, total parenteral nutrition, because it plays an important source of nutrition. Then the second phase is the introduction of enteral feeding, which usually begins as soon as possible after the surgery. So soon after the surgery, when the baby is not able to take, then we can give through IV, okay, or the enteral feeding. Then the final phase of nutritional support occurs when growth and development. So we have to monitor the growth and development as the baby is receiving all these feedings. The numerous complications are associated with short bowel syndrome and long-term TPN infection. So when the baby is always given through enteral feeding, that is TPN, it can become a source of infection. Metabolic and technical complication can also occur. So we have to keep all this in mind, and accordingly the nutrition has to be provided to the child. And bacterial overgrowth is likely to occur when the ileocecal valve is absent or a deleted segment of bowel with poor motility. So now what is this ileocecal valve? It is nothing but the sphincter which is found in between the small intestine and large intestine. So if they are cutting it, or if it is absent, then it can become a source of infection. So that has to be avoided. Okay, so these are the intestinal valve. Many surgical interventions can be done, that is including intestinal valves. Okay, so they have to make sure that if ileocecal valve is not there, they can create it. They can make a valve between the ileum and the cecum, that is a small intestine and large intestine. Tapering enteroplasty or structurotoplasty. Now structurotoplasty or enteroplasty is nothing but what they will do is they will cut surgery management. It is the typical surgical management. So here they will cut the intestine, okay, and they will make it in a zigzag pattern of the intestine. So they will cut and they will make that in a zigzag pattern of the intestine. So obviously, what is the idea of this kind of surgery is, it lengthens the intestine. So that has to be done. And then other procedures like intestinal lengthening, interposed segment have been used to show intestinal transit, reduce bacterial overgrowth or increase mucosal surface area. So these are the various therapeutic management. Mainly we have to deal with the nutrition, TPN, prevent complications and surgical procedures. Prognosis, when we see for infants with SBS, have improved with advances in TPN and with the understanding of the importance of intraluminal nutrition. So based upon the nutrition, the weight gain and the nutrition status of the child is maintained. So coming on to nursing management, so mainly they have to monitor regarding the administration of nutritional therapy, and then they have to minimize the risk of complication when it is given through the central venous access device. We have to make sure that it does not lead to any kind of infection, okay, occlusion, dislodgement or accidental removal care of enteral feeding tubes. All this has to be monitored properly, and enteral feeding tolerance are also important. We have to see whether the child is able to cope up or the individual is able to cope up with the feeding. When long-term parental nutrition is required, preparing the family for home care is major nursing responsibility. Okay, we have to prepare the family members for it because it will be very painful for them. We should also teach them, how long it has to be kept early to prevent healthy, because we do that because we don't want the child to be at home all the time, at the hospital all the time with subsequent member. Okay, so teaching them subsequent problems can be prevented. So they have to handle it properly if it is done in the home. Okay, and then when hospitalization is prolonged, automatically it affects the child's development and emotional need. So that has to be met accordingly. This often requires special planning to promote normal family adjustment and adaptation of the hospital routine. Okay, so this is all about short bowel syndrome. We have seen the definition, causes, therapeutic management, prognosis, nursing management. Okay, so next we will move on to inflammatory conditions, and very common and important for medical, surgical as well as for pediatric, okay, is appendicitis. So we know what is appendicitis. It is the inflammation of the vermiform appendix. So this appendix in humans, it is not in use, but still if it gets infected, it can lead to major fatal condition. So when we say appendix, it is a blind sac at the end of the cecum. At the end of the cecum, the large intestine, it is found as a blind sac. So you can see in the diagram that is given there. As the most cause of emergency, abdominal surgery in children. Okay, if it gets infected, acute is fine, but chronic, where the child has severe pain, immediately the child or the adult has to be taken for surgery, otherwise it will burst. If it bursts, again it leads to sepsis. It can become fatal. It can lead to anaphylactic shock and death of the child or an individual. So in United States incidence, if you see, about 60 to 80,000 cases are diagnosed every year. Then the average age of children with appendicitis is 10 years with boys and girls, equally affected before puberty. So death rate, if you see, 0.1% for non-perforated appendicitis and 5% for perforated appendicitis. That if it is bursting, then we have seen about 5% of death. If without bursting itself, we have seen that there are 0.1% of death. So etiology, when we see, it is the obstruction of the lumen of the appendix. So what is happening? The lumen of the appendix, it gets obstructed usually by the hardened fecal matter. When the feces enters into that part of the appendix, okay, it leads to swollen lymphoid tissue. Frequently occurring after a viral infection can also obstruct the appendix. So it can be because of the obstruction that is caused because of the fecal matter, or it can also because of the, it can be also because of the viral infection which can obstruct the appendix. Another rare cause of obstruction is a parasite such as Enterobius vermicularis or pinworms, which can obstruct. So it can be because of pinworms, okay, certain kind of worms, or it can be because of certain Enterobius vermicularis. It is a parasite, Enterobius vermicularis, or it can be pinworms which can also obstruct. So these are all the etiological factors: hardened fecal matter, or it can be viral infection or parasites or worms. Okay. Next we will go to clinical manifestation, because patho is not required for you as such, okay, but we'll just read through it. So obstruction, when it happens, especially with fecal, is the principal. This is the major cause. Majorly if you see, it is because of the fecal matter. So obstruction leads to infection, it causes allergy. Then organism also are found in the appendix, like you have streptococci, staphylococcus aureus, coliform bacilli, pinworms may be an initial cause of inflammation. If you further also have, apart from fecal matter, all these organisms can also cause inflammation. So the mucosa of the appendix, it gets inflamed and it gets ulcerated. Then the lumen becomes distended, thereby impairing the blood supply. So when it becomes distended after inflammation, it cuts off the blood supply. Then bacteria may escape through the mucosal wall and can diffuse peritonitis. So this will enter into the peritoneum and cause peritonitis, the bacteria, and then confined by adjacent. So the other adjacent surrounding area also gets inflamed. So when we say clinical manifestation, McBurney's point, okay, so now what is that McBurney's point? Usually the child will be having pain at the right lower quadrant of the abdominal pain. When you press, the baby will be having pain. Then fever, rigid abdomen, you will find it is hard, decreased or absent bowel sounds will be there, vomiting, constipation can be there, or diarrhea can be there, anorexia will be there, tachycardia, rapid shallow breathing, pallor, lethargy, irritability, stooped posture we can see in the baby because of the pain. The child will not be able to stand straight, but the child will bend. Then you have diagnostic evaluation like history collection, physical examination, McBurney's point, as I told you. The most intense site of pain may be McBurney point, located at the point midway between the anterior superior iliac crest and the umbilicus. Okay, so when you assess between the anterior superior iliac crest and the umbilicus, okay, so you will see the midpoint, there is a pain. Then ultrasonography USG can be done, then CT scan or MRI can be done to find out the inflamed appendix. So therapeutic management, so before perforation includes rehydration, antibiotic, surgical removal. Appendectomy has to be done. Okay, the operation is usually performed through a right lower quadrant incision, open appendectomy. They will just open. Laparoscopic surgery also is very common, which can be done to treat acute appendicitis. Recovery is rapid. If no complications occur, the hospital stay is very short. They will just cut open, either laparotomy or laparoscopic. They will try to remove and ligate the cecum. Okay, now the last one is nursing management. So as we know, we have to, the nurses assess the vital signs, look at the surgical area, okay, and then we have to see the location. Rebound tenderness will be there, sharp pain when pressure, when you palpate and take off your hand, the patient will be having severe, this is before the surgery. Okay, so you have to assess the abdominal pain, McBurney's point, and then you have to see for rebound tenderness, which is a sharp pain when pressure applied on abdomen after deep palpation. Okay, and then presence of peritonitis is there, or what we have to see, if the bacteria has escaped into the peritoneum, it can lead to peritonitis. Then we have to assess the vital signs, fluid and electrolyte balance, laboratory data, and then client with appendix. Take all the diagnostic X-ray or CT, whatever has been informed, take that and keep everything ready. Pre-operative, you know, so you have to assess for the pain, location, duration, how long the pain it is, assess the vital signs, maintain NPO, then give analgesics, allow comfortable position, IV fluids, maintain intake and output record, then assess for signs of peritonitis because it is in a severe condition. So that has to be assessed, and apart from that, what do we do? You should also be able to take consent. Please don't forget, it is not mentioned. If it is a newborn baby, children below, minor, again we can take it from the parents. Okay, take consent form. Then post-operative, you know, you have to maintain vital signs, then look for the surgical site, see for any blood oozing, maintain NPO until as per order, then IV fluids, maintain intake and output chart, wound care, change dressing, analgesics provided. You have to encourage the child and the family members, you have to provide psychological support, you have to teach parents about home care, importance and follow-up care. Okay, so all this we have to keep in mind, pre-operative, post-operative care. So like medical surgical, even in Pediatric nursing, everywhere you have to write nursing diagnosis based upon the complaints, based upon the clinical manifestations. Okay, so next topic we will continue in the next video.